Good morning, everyone, and happy Saturday. How's everyone doing this morning?
Hey, good
Great.
morning.
Wonderful.
All right. I am sporting the sunglasses and the Bucky t-shirt because Emily and I are en route to the Outer Banks right now, broadcasting Voices of HealthPointe from the hotel room in Richmond, Virginia. But we are actually into our last Saturday of April. Can you believe that? It's so incredible. You know, we kind of benchmark, or at least in my mind, I often benchmark my sense of time by these episodes of Voices of HealthPointe, and it never ceases to amaze me when we're like, wow, where did that month go? But here we are, the end of April. For those that are able to join us live, Voices of HealthPointe is a time where we get together at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is really early for some of the folks west of us in Texas and Colorado and so forth. But we appreciate everyone that is willing and able to join in. This is where we just talk all things HealthPointe. So it's coaches and clients and prospective coaches and prospective clients. We typically have some docket items, and true to form, today we're going to have a docket item that I'll kick off with. My docket item is titled "The Burn That Builds Your Brain," and then we've got Laurel that is going to kind of continue with that brain in mind, but we didn't compare notes, before doing this. It's just the way it happens. And that is how your mind can bend time. So she's got a docket item on that. And then Carol mentioned that as a wrap up, she's got a red alert. And again, we did not compare notes. I don't usually wear red. I'm wearing my red Bucky shirt. So I guess we're consistent with the red alert coming from Carol. So we'll get going on things. I'm going to go ahead and do a mute all just so that we don't, so that nobody's interrupted on their docket item as they're reading. So just know that there we go. Let me try this again. Okay, I think I've got a mute all going. So just please unmute yourself as the docket items are wrapped up. We, of course, invite commentary and questions and stuff like that. So be sure to unmute yourself as we move along. And for those that aren't able to join in live, these episodes are uploaded to Voices of HealthPointe YouTube channel. So look for this episode. I think we're up in the well into the 130s. So with that, let me get going on my docket item. First, I want to say the content shared here is for informational and educational purposes only. It's not intended as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine. Our discussions draw on wellness concepts similar to those found in the HealthPointe methodology, which we hold in high regard. The ideas presented are independently developed and do not represent or speak on behalf of the HealthPointe brand. Again, my docket item is titled, "The Burn That Builds Your Brain." There's a moment many of you have experienced. You're walking at a steady pace, your breathing is controlled, the movement feels sustainable, and then you pick it up. Your pace increases, your heart rate climbs, your legs begin to work harder. Maybe you head up a hill or take a flight of stairs, and then you feel it, that familiar burn. Most people recognize this as a sign of intensity, a signal that the body is working at a higher level. What is less commonly understood is that this moment may be doing something far beyond your muscles. It may be directly influencing your brain. This is where the work of researchers like Dr. Tommy Wood become especially meaningful. Trained as a medical doctor at the University of Oxford, completing a PhD in physiology and neuroscience at the University of Oslo, and now serving as an assistant professor of pediatrics and neuroscience at the University of Washington, his work sits at the intersection of metabolism, performance, and brain health. Emily and I had the opportunity to see him speak at a metabolic health conference in Florida back in January of 2023. He was part of a panel of presenters, and his message was both simple and profound. The body is constantly sending signals, and the brain is constantly responding. One of the most powerful of those signals is something many of us have misunderstood for years: lactate. When you move into those high intensity movements, your muscles begin to produce lactate. For a long time, lactate was viewed as a byproduct of effort, something associated with fatigue. But that view has shifted. Lactate is now understood to be both a fuel and a signal. It leaves the muscle, enters the bloodstream, and travels through the body, including the brain. And once it arrives, it begins to influence what the brain does next. Lactate has the ability to cross into the brain through specialized transporters. And once inside, it helps trigger the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. BDNF is often referred to as the, quote, miracle grow of the brain. It supports the survival of neurons. It strengthens connections that have recently been used. It encourages the formation of new neural pathways. In simple terms, it helps the brain adapt, learn, and stay resilient. And importantly, it acts in areas that have recently been active, reinforcing the patterns and pathways that are actually being used. There is also growing discussion around how this process supports the integrity of white matter, the communications pathways of the brain that allow different regions to work together effectively. So what feels like a localized physical experience is in reality a whole system signal. When you step back, this begins to matter in a different way, because when we talk about long-term brain health, the conversation often includes concerns like Alzheimer's and dementia. These conditions are complex with many contributing factors, but one of the underlying questions continues to surface. What signals is the brain receiving over time? Is it being asked to adapt? Is it being given a reason to maintain and strengthen its connections? Or has the environment that we've created become so efficient that many of those signals have been reduced? This is where something familiar may begin to sound a little different. In a previous version of the HealthPointe app, there was a daily message, day number 12, that introduced what was called the 90-second fat burning booster. It's called the 90-second fat burning booster. It described a simple pattern. It said, quote, walk at a moderate pace for 10 minutes, then speed up to high intensity, unquote, and then return to a moderate pace and repeat. It also noted, quote, if you put a little more effort into challenging your heart will benefit even more, unquote. At that time, this was framed primarily through the lens of fat burning and metabolic rate. And that was, and still is, true. But what's interesting is that this same pattern aligns remarkably well with what we now understand about lactate and brain health. These periods of increased intensity are not just increasing your heart rate. They are likely generating the very lactate signals that travels to the brain, triggering BDNF and supporting the processes tied to learning, memory, and neural resilience. In other words, something that was already being practiced for metabolic benefit may also be supporting cognitive health in a meaningful way. So this brings us back to something very practical. You don't need to overhaul your routine. You don't need to add complexity for the sake of complexity. A steady walk, followed by a period of increased intensity, then back to steady. Repeated a few times. What may have once felt like a simple strategy for fat burning now reveals itself as something more complete, a way to send signals. And over time, those signals matter, not because of any single effort, but because of their consistency, because of their repetition, because of the way the body and the brain respond when given something meaningful to adapt to. So the next time you find yourself in that moment, when your pace increases, when your heart rate climbs, when your muscles begin to work harder and that familiar burn begins to show up, you might see it just a little differently, not just as a signal that your body is working, but as a signal that may be reaching further than you once thought, from your muscles to your bloodstream to your brain, and asking a simple question, is this something worth adapting to? And in that moment, whether you realize it or not, you are already answering. All right, guys, that is my docket item called The Burn That Builds Your Brain. And Laurel, I know you've got a brain or mind docket item as well. But in the meantime, if anybody has any comments or questions, unmute and chime in.
I have a question, and that is Steve Beber and you also, Eric, have a lot of really good input on the excess sports energy products. And I was wondering if the post-workout, if that has any positive bearing on this article. I know I'm throwing probably a heavy duty question out, but if either you or Steve or anybody has any input on that particular product.
Well, I heard Pam earlier. I'm not sure if Steve is on. If Steve is on, I will punt this to him.
And if he's not, we'll
Hey,
punt it over later, but he
um,
just,
I I would be happy to punt it to Stephen. I know he's talked about that before, but he and Jeremy got up and left at 4:30 this morning to go turkey hunting. So
Okay.
they're they are out there, and he was not able to be part of it today, but he has talked about the post-workout, but I certainly couldn't say anything on his behalf. But good question, though. Good
It is a good
question.
question. Yeah. And good luck to Steve and Jeremy on the turkey hunting this morning. So that's a great question, Carol. I don't know if I was just to kind of just, I don't want to say guess, but just kind of offer a little bit of insight on that. I would say that I believe the post-workout recovery is focusing more on the muscle recovery, whereas the production of the lactate is something that comes as a result of that high intensity workout where you're feeling that burn, you're feeling that lactate. Often we associate it almost with a negativity, right? We almost
yeah,
associate it with like, oh, we need to get this lactate out of our system, and that is an entire discussion on that. But I think the post workout recovery is probably addressing that. Whereas in the meantime, separate would be the lactate that has already been in the bloodstream. That's the important thing about it. There's many of us have heard of the term the blood-brain barrier, right?
mhm,
There's an incredible protective mechanism within the brain that it's quite difficult to get kind of things into the brain. In other words, you can ingest a number of things, you eat, you drink, whatever, it goes into your digestive tract, fuels a bunch of our biology, muscles, heart, lungs, etc. But for things to get into the bloodstream and find their way to the brain, it has to be able to cross that blood-brain barrier, which is a protective part of our biology. And lactate is one that the research shows that it does. And in doing so, it's not only working its way into the brain, but also building some of these neural connections and so forth. And so I think it's separate in terms of the product that would help with, because I think that product, if I was to guess, is working strictly with the recovery of the muscles that have been
yeah.
stressed and strained.
So does
But
that mean that this is Tom Llewellyn? Does that mean that if you're out of shape and producing more lactate, you're actually doing better, more for your brain than if you were healthy?
I don't know. I don't know if that's a knowing Tom, that's probably a bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment. Um, so yes, Tom. So in
He's
fact,
fishing.
there's a new version of HealthPointe, which is to become um, you know, unhealthy first, be very unhealthy metabolically. Why? Because it won't take much to stimulate your brain, apparently, is what the science is showing, Tom. Yes, so yes.
Well, there is hope.
There is hope, right?
It's kind of like
Uh,
before the prep days when you go out and you have your feast and stuff. You want to do the bad stuff so that the good stuff really kicks in.
right. So you can feel so much smarter. Oh, good stuff, Tom. Thanks. Um,
Is
well,
lactate different than lactic acid?
no, that's one and the same. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, great question. Actually, should have made note of that. So yeah, it's referred to often as lactic acid, and that's what it feels like, right? We've all felt that. In fact, preparing for this and just kind of the way we operate in HealthPointe, we're at a hotel here in Richmond on our way to the Outer Banks. For those that are joining a little bit late, Emily and I are in Richmond, Virginia, not in Michigan, but it's not a big hotel, but we're on the fourth floor, which means that, when I go downstairs this morning, grab some coffee and stuff, I take the stairs, right? That's one of the things that we often do is you just build your life and habits and stuff like that around that versus taking an elevator. And the point is that, going particularly up those stairs, we've all felt it, right? Stairs in your house or stairs in a hotel or wherever, you feel that burn. And so that's that lactic acid, Laurel, or lactate. And now, when you feel that, not only do you have that kind of that good feeling that, hey, I'm creating a strain on my muscles, and there's benefit to that, right? In fact, right now, I believe Emily is down in a downstairs gym doing her long run. I'm sure she's feeling some lactic acid in her legs doing her long run. So you feel that. We've all felt that going up and down stairs, running on a treadmill, maybe doing some deep squats or something, or maybe some dumbbells or something that is creating that strain and that burn, as we say it. And now we can also recognize that that is not only helping our muscles, but also our brain. And that lactate is crossing the blood-brain barrier and helping those neural connections and strengthening. The work of Dr. Tommy Wood, he's just by the way, this is one of those guys where you go, okay, he walks his talk. I'm going to guess him probably in his 30s. And the guy's kind of like a Dr. Andrew Huberman or something like that, or a Peter Attia. These are not couch potatoes that are pontificating about this research. These are guys like Dr. Tommy Wood. The guy's a beast, right? The guy's, loves to work out and stuff like that. But what he's saying is that, we've evolved, our biology has evolved and strengthened under a level of stress. Stress is something that is termed today often in a negative connotation. And certainly if you have chronic stress, particularly if it's emotional stress, that can be very, bad or not be beneficial. But stress is something that he points out that we've evolved for, thousands and thousands of years. And your brain responds to that, says, hey, if you need to be lifting these things, doing these things, physically running or walking or whatever, we're going to map that in the brain to support that because obviously it's necessary. He goes into, and I didn't go into it in this narrative piece, but all the other things that we associate with coaching this program and the business aspects, the social interactions that we derived in evolution, where we needed each other. We required that social interaction for survival. We don't necessarily need it for survival now in that sense, but we certainly benefit, like we are right now during our walk and talk, from the interaction of one another. He also talks about the learning, right? That's a big thing. We had a fantastic Thursday night training with Katrina Boyle on HealthPointe coaching. And, I think all of us felt some lactic acid burn during that one, the brain burn during that one. But these are stresses that Dr. Tommy Wood emphasizes are beneficial in creating these and strengthening these neural connections. So it's a wholesale look at brain health as it relates to things like Alzheimer's and dementia and so forth. Anyhow,
Hey, Eric.
long-winded answer.
Hey,
Yes.
Eric, can I add something in? This is Larry Fitzpatrick. You
Yes.
know,
Good morning, Larry.
hey, how's it going this morning? I was thinking about what Carol was asking about that post workout. You know, I've been coaching for over 30 some years. But, when we were training athletes, and, and you might be familiar with this too, a lot of times we have workouts. And so a lot of times we're doing runs in between. Okay, if you're a sprinter, then you do so many runs in between or something. Then you rest and then you go again. And that post workout, a lot of times we would look at how fast our athletes would, after we do a workout, they rest for a short period of time, and then they go into another workout or another, whatever length of race that they were running. But as we saw that as the athletes got more in shape, that it didn't take them as long to recuperate. And so that's what I look at post workout recovery as your ability to be active and then to recuperate a lot faster. And I find that that continues to work in that same fashion as you're doing things. As you get better in shape, you're able to, like if you're a track runner, you have several heats that you run. You run a heat, and then if you win your heat, then you go on to the next one. Same kind of thing in swimming. And so your body needs to recuperate so that you can continue on and have that same time that you're looking for that you did before. And if the faster your body recuperates, then the more you're able to repeat that performance that you're doing. So that's how I look at post workout. It's supposed to be for your muscles and your joints, but after you finish that workout, then you can rest up for a minute, and then you're able to repeat that same process and maybe get the same results if your body's able to recuperate that fast. Now, I don't know whether that's what we're looking at or looking for, and I haven't used the post workout, um, recovery. So I'm not sure whether that's how it works, but that's how I look at it, as being able to work out, recover real quickly, and then repeat that performance.
Larry,
Oh,
I'd like to
that's
comment on
great.
that. Sorry, go ahead, Eric.
No, go ahead, Carol. Yeah.
I would like to comment on that in a positive way because if you're wearing any kind of a device, you have a resting heart rate and then you have the heart rate you've worked up to. And how quickly you can turn around and get back to that resting heart rate is exactly what Larry was saying. And I don't know how many people actually pay attention to that, but that is a very, very good sign of, are you moving ahead? Are you increasing your strength, increasing your heart rate, not increasing your resting heart rate, decreasing it, working up to a higher heart rate, and how fast you get back down is in direct correlation to your heart health. And the more you do things like the walking or whatever, the more that you're going to find that turnaround very much quicker. And that's a very big sign, kind of like a blood pressure sign or a A1C or all these readings that we do. That's a real important reading. And Eric, you really put clarity on something for me. I have a tendency, Hank likes from a safety standpoint, he likes me to just walk around the neighborhood. So typically that's what I do unless I've got company and I got a walking buddy. But there's an area called celery fields, and I like to go there. And you just really hit the nail on the head because I'm going to set my goal to do that at least a couple of times a week. And celery fields is a hill, a big hill that you walk up, and it's a very perpendicular hill. I mean, it goes pretty high, pretty fast. And so your heart rate really starts to increase and you can feel it and you can feel, whatever you want to call it, the lactic acid. You can just feel that burn in your legs and stuff. And that's the one thing has been kind of on my mind is when I walk the neighborhood, even though I walk fast, my heart rate will go up, but the burn in the legs is different. And when I do that celery fields, it's a short walk up, but by the time I get to the top, the heart rate is up, given that little few minutes of high interval. And then you walk around a relatively flat area. It's gorgeous up there. You get beautiful views, but you walk around that whole area, and that's where you've got that 10 minutes of resting, and then you can go back down and then go back up, and it's a perfect setup. And I noticed definitely when I lived in Brighton and we had a two-story home, the lower level being one of the stories, and I was up and down the stairs all the time. And in Florida, everything is split level, no stairs, no basements. And so there's a big difference in the strength on your legs. I notice even, especially for me, the top of my legs. And doing something like that, celery fields or incline, or for all of you that got stairs, doing those stairs, I think just really hits a whole different set of muscles if you're working that right into your walking routine. And something I have to force myself to do because of the nature of our topography around here. But thank you, Eric, for that, because now I got no excuses but to go to the celery fields.
And
Sure. Go
when I
ahead,
think
Pam.
about that, when I think about the whole concept of your docket item, I'm thinking about our elderly friends and family members and how important it is to keep them walking. And the unfortunate thing is, for their clarity of mind, it's just, it compounds the effect of that losing the quickness, the alertness, and so forth, because if they're dormant, they are just not going to have that. Now that you've explained it, the lactic acid running through their brain as well. And what a shame that we don't stress that as much, like in our elder care. If we're doing home care, with our family members, and they don't want to get up, they don't want to move, it's just easier for them to sit or something, how important this is for their brain function. And it's really great to hear the science behind how that works. And praise God for all of those um, physical ed teachers, phys ed teachers, right, Larry? Steve would always say that they need physical education as a number one requirement, as opposed to, putting it way down on the elective score and thinking, it's not important. It's just you know, I mean, we need to, we need to know this piece of it in our education, how that stimulates the brain. Some of us realize that after we've had a walk or something, we do feel alert and more focused, but it's not built into the education process. And I think that would be great.
Mm.
Yeah,
I agree with
that is so.
Hey, you do have to, it helps with your circulation,
Mhm.
which is carrying your blood through your brain. And so it would have to, I would think it would have to help you to function better and your brain to function better as well.
It definitely does. And, thanks so much for bringing this up, Larry, in the context that you did, and Pam for building on that, and Carol. And I'll just say that, Dr. Tommy Wood actually address that. I try to keep my narrative pieces, from not being, 45 minutes long, but I will tell you that, he addressed the issue of, particularly with kids, so you're talking about physical ed and teaching physical ed. This is not just a muscle or a phys ed thing. He says this is for cognitive development, particularly challenging games, games that are hand-eye coordination, things like whatever, basketball, soccer. He talked about other of all ranges. He talked about pickleball, right, which is a big thing right now. But these things are not just, he explained, it's not just the physical benefit of building your muscles, but also the cognitive connections, the neural connections that are built during that. In fact, in the one of the episodes that I was listening to and building out this piece, he was being interviewed by Dr. Drew, I think he's a Dr. Drew Peru. He works a lot with Dr. Mark Hyman, really great podcast. And Drew and his wife had recently had a baby, and they were talking about the cognitive development of the baby while in the belly, right? And if they're born premature, about how that can be associated with certain factors in terms of cognitive development. And what Dr. Tommy Wood really made a point of is that while, yes, it's important to have ideally a full term baby, he said what the research shows is more important is that home environment, because that baby, it spends, maybe 9 months in the womb. But when, and this was, I think, very heartening to Drew and his wife, is that allowing that baby to, they talked about things like, of course you want to create safety for your baby and for your young child, but don't overprotect them, allow them, how do they learn to walk? They fail, they have that stress, they cry. Those are stressors, but you have to allow that. And he said, he was talking from a neuroscience standpoint, how important that is for the child. Even if, like in Drew's case, their baby was born premature, a bit premature, he said, yep, but what's going to matter more is what you're doing in terms of his nutrition. He talked about, breast milk and the benefit of that. He talked about the home environment and those stressors for that. And then Larry, I just also just wanted to comment and give a shout out to Bob Andrews. When you talked about recovery, and for those of us that have listened to a lot of Bob Andrews audios, and for those that are on here and not familiar, if you have the Network 21 app, that is the business building app, you can just get into a search for Bob Andrews and you'll find dozens of titles. But he talks about that speed of recovery. And because he's a bike rider, he talked about it in the context of, when your muscles are pumping, you're climbing a hill on a bike. What differentiates the elite athlete, to your point, Larry, from someone that is not just that fatigue, but rather when you top that hill, your speed of recovery. Somebody that is an amateur, they're going to take 45 minutes to recover from that burn. Somebody that is an elite athlete, to your point, Larry, is that they're going to have a quicker speed of recovery. Their heart rate is going to come back into normalcy. Carol, you touched on this as well. That's a form of measurement for fitness, is not just your heart rate and max heart rate, but how quickly it can get back to a normal resting heart rate after that excursion. And Bob Andrews talks about it in the context of other stressors in life. He talked about the stressors of business building. If you do something in the effort to build your business and it causes you a stress, I'm paraphrasing him. He's like, okay, what is your recovery time from that? Do you go into, not making light of depression, but I think he used the term, do you go into clinical depression for the next month because you had a bad day? Or do you just, like a healthy physical athlete, do you recover quickly? You're like, okay, I had that didn't go well for me. I put in the effort, that didn't go well. You suffer from it for maybe a few minutes or a half a day, and then boom, you're right back at it. You don't take 10 weeks to recover from this emotional hit that you had in the effort of building your business. So when you mentioned that, Larry, I just had to give a shout out about Bob Andrews. What a phenomenal teacher his content is. So, all right. Laurel, and if anybody else has anything, but Laurel, I know I saw you kind of setting up. Yes, Hank.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And I'm ready to listen to Laurel also, but I just want to share something with all of you because I hear a lot of times about joint pain, inflammation from all this stuff going on, right? And I want to refer to my favorite go-to book, The Insider's Book of Healing by Dr. Mark McCosey, MD, PhD, okay? I came across this just recently, and I thought I'd share it, which is very, very good. And he calls them herbal supplements that can help reduce inflammation and pain, especially joint. And he calls them the ABCs for painkillers. And they're supplements. They are ashwagandha, boswellia, and curcumin. These three pain powerhouses have come under increasing scientific scrutiny, not only because of their benefits for pain and inflammation, but for a host of other health benefits as well. For example, Boswellia extract, which is in our joint pain, Boswellia, uh, Boswellia extract is standard medical treatment, including pain drugs for knee osteoarthritis symptoms. After 12 weeks, the people who were given Boswellia had just as much reduction in pain and restoration of knee function as the group that got the standard treatment. In addition, the Boswellia group was able to walk better than the other group and had better overall emotional and social functions. Curcumin, which is turmeric, right, which we have, curcumin's effectiveness at relieving pain has been well established in a wide range of inflammatory conditions. A new laboratory study used the novel approach of loading lipid nanoparticles into a curcumin supplement, which markedly improved pain and molecular measures of inflammation. So we got the ashwagandha, the capsules, we got boswellia in our joint health, and curcumin, of course, is in our turmeric capsules. So we got all three available, and I started taking all three and take them together, and they really have made. I can feel a difference. They feel really great. So just to make people aware of that, they got the 3 grand products, which we can depend on Nutrilite being coming from organic sources, and it is what it says on the label. It is not like some other ones in the marketplace, and we have the best of life. So again, the ABCs are ashwagandha, boswellia, and curcumin. Just want to share that with you.
Oh, that's great, Hank. A quick question on those are when you reference taking them, are you speaking like each is in its individual form, or are you speaking of a product within the Nutrilite line that has all three? So
No, there were
I
three
think,
individual capsules. Right?
okay,
Okay.
so you're
We got the
taking the
ashwagandha capsules, curcumin capsules, and of course, boswellia are the tablets in the joint health.
okay, so the Boswellia is in the joint health product.
The boswellia is the joint health.
Yep. Okay, great. Well, and the reason my antennas are up on this a little bit is my little bit of a meniscus knee issue is something that I think I'm going to lean into the ABCs for it. So thank you for that, Hank. I love it. All right,
Just
so
a little clarification too. The curcumin that Hank speaks about is the turmeric, the Nutrilite organic turmeric. That's the name of the product. In case you think they're two different things, they're not.
okay. So if you get the turmeric and
Yes,
then the joint health, so the products would be the turmeric, joint health, those would be two of them. And then the third one is just the flat out ashwagandha product.
correct.
Yep.
Correct.
Great. Well, that doesn't make ABCs though. Now, how am I going to do it? That says T. You're throwing a T in there for turmeric.
Let's see. A for eggs, B for brain, and C for what's C for? Come on, guys.
Well, our C turned into a T. It was curcumin, and now it's turmeric.
Okay, yeah,
Anyhow.
curcumin. Yeah, there you go.
Well, thank
Boswellia is
you,
B.
Hank.
Yeah, that's right. And A is for ashwagandha.
All right. Well, Laurel, are you still able to unpack your
Yeah,
docket
I
items?
I set up my camera a little bit ago because I knew I couldn't hold it through this whole article, and I found this neat little cabin out here in the jungle walk. But I've been walking up and down since we talked about the brain, the stuff you talked about. There's a ramp that leads to this, so I've been walking up and down that ramp this whole time, going, okay, maybe about now. Then I'd get to the hut and I'd go, oh no, I got to go back. I got to go back. So yes, all right, I'll get right to it because it is a little bit longer than usual, but And it's an article I've read. It's on bending time, how your mind can bend time. And it is something that takes some thought. And when I first read it, I was like, what? I don't know. So I've tried to simplify it. We'll see how I do. Your mind can bend time, and here's how. Research and tools from psychology and neuroscience can empower all of us. A minute is always a minute, except when it isn't. The idea was to put to the test in a 2023 Harvard study. Researchers induced minor bruising on participants' forearms and then had them sit in rooms where the clocks ran at normal speed, half speed, or double speed. Crucially, the actual elapsed time for each of the rooms was identical across all the conditions, 28 minutes, but the clocks ticked at different rates. The results even surprised the researchers. The wounds healed faster when people thought more time had passed and slower when they thought less time had passed. Lead author Peter Engel said, personally, I didn't think it would work. And then it did work. A century ago, Albert Einstein demonstrated that time is relative, not fixed. He explained the idea with a simple, humorous example. Einstein said, if you put your hand on a hot stove for a minute, it seems like an hour. Sit with a pretty girl for an hour, and it seems like a minute. That's relativity. Now, psychologists and neurologists are finding that our sense of time is not only inherently subjective, but also highly malleable. We can't stop the clock, but by understanding how we perceive time, we can make minutes feel longer, heal faster, and even expand our memories. And they go into a couple areas. How the mind affects reality. The Harvard healing experience was a pivotal piece of evidence that mind and body are not only connected, but may be one and the same. Author said, we weren't really manipulating time itself. We were manipulating the expectations. There's that word. If they, the people, think more time had passed, they expected more healing, and those expectations can shape the body. Most people think of mind-body effects only in terms of emotion, he added, yet psychology is embedded in everything the body does. I would argue that the mind influences every physiological outcome to some degree. But expectations are not the only mind bender. While believing time has sped up will aid healing, high arousal negative emotions such as fear significantly dilate our perception of time, making it feel slower. In one study, the participant watched frightening clips from terror or scary movies. Afterwards, a blue circle was presented in the center of the computer screen. Participants perceived that the circle lasted longer after watching frightening movies than after watching neutral or sad movies. Fear accelerates the internal clock, making time seem to pass more quickly and prompting action. That's our fight or flight response. Because the internal clock is ticking faster, measuring more units of time per second, the external world appears to move in slow motion. If you've ever been in a car accident, you can know what that's like. The time dilation allows the brain to process information with higher resolution during life-threatening situations. Slowing time, another sidebar. We can also make time feel longer in positive ways, seeking out moments of awe. We've talked about that before. In a 2012 study in the Physiological Science, found that feeling awe, whether from a story or a memory, makes time feel more abundant. Awe acts as a reset button for the brain. It brings people intensely into the present moment. According to the extended now theory, focusing on the present moment elongates time perception because we're not mentally rushing towards the future. By filling the present with vastness, awe offsets the feeling that time is slipping away, making life feel more satisfying. The study also found that people who felt awe were less impatient, more willing to help others, preferred experiences over material products. We can also slow our perception of time through the practice of savoring, and that's a new term, different from awe. Savoring is putting a highlighter pen on our experiences, said psychologist Tamara Chansky. Savoring does not require extra duration, just rather a shift in your attention. For the time-starved, I thought that was a good time. For the time-starved, Chansey suggests taking, quote, 2 more bites of an experience, whether it's tasting coffee or looking out a window, to engage the brain's awareness. This simple act creates, quote, invisible little expanders within our finite days in a way of feeding the spirit without requiring a restructuring of your entire schedule. We could rush through the whole day so easily, and we might feel somewhat or even very productive at the end of the day, but we might not feel good. So finding these little pockets helps us to feel that expansion within. Chansky's insight aligns with other research findings that training attention through things like meditation can change how we perceive time. And in fact, experienced meditators feel that time passes more slowly during meditation and also in their daily lives than people who do not meditate. Being in nature also slows our experience of time. In another study, participants overestimated the duration of their walk by nearly 2 minutes when it took place in nature, whereas their estimates were pretty accurate for urban walks. Nature exposure increases mindfulness and reduces stress, states that are theoretically linked to a slowing of the internal clock. If you need to, quote, buy yourself a little time, you can find it in the wild. The study concluded, quote, that time grows on trees. And then the last, well, no, not the last one, but close to the last, memories in time. Why do childhood summers feel endless and adult years seem to fly by? The answer lies in how our brains process novelty. I found this very interesting. Our brains measure time based on how many new experiences are created. The more unique, meaningful, or changing experiences we have, the longer the stretch of time feels in our memory, said Mark Whitman, who is a research fellow at the Institute for Frontier Areas of Psychology and Mental Health in Germany. On the other hand, routine compresses time in your memory by halting the recording of details it already knows. When neurons fire repeatedly in response to the same stimulus, their response diminishes. They become efficient, but they record less data. Therefore, to stretch your subjective life, you need to introduce variation. A fulfilled and varied life is a long life. The effect is not simply about filling your schedule with busyness, it's about deeper emotional resonance with the world. 100 days of routine collapse into a single memory unit in the brain, but a week of travel or new experiences remains distinct and expansive. Research by Whitman also adds a nuance. Cognitive capacity also plays a role. As we age, the perception that the last decade flew by is partly due to cognitive decline, which affects our ability to encode complex memories. However, this effect is moderate. People who stay mentally and physically fit and continue to seek novel, emotionally rewarding experiences can subjectively expand their sense of time regardless of their age. And finally, the liberating power of finitude, the awareness that our time is limited. It's often viewed as morbid, but it can be a source of liberation. Being finite creatures in a world of infinite possibilities, we are free to choose how we spend our time. With that freedom comes responsibility. Every choice incurs the opportunity cost of infinite other lives that we cannot lead. We need to focus on the present. Acknowledging that life is finite also requires us to choose what really matters. One dilemma is deciding whether to trade time for money or money for time. In a longitudinal study of 1,000 graduating students, those who tended to value time over money were more likely to choose intrinsically meaningful paths after college, and a year later reported much greater overall well-being than those who prioritized the money. Yet life is not just about a career, it's also about people. Bonding with people helps you feel grounded in time, and a 2024 study found that people who felt socially isolated during the pandemic experienced temporal rupture, a profound sense of disconnection in which they struggle to track days, order past events, imagine the future. When we build connections with others, especially those we love, we gain an accurate orientation in time. The researchers concluded that to use time in your favor, embrace the present moment, cherish the love of your loved ones, find interest and passion in your work and activities, and above all, give meaning to your life. We can't halt the clock, but we can reshape how time feels, which makes our lives richer at any stage. And that's the end. Now
Love
you know
it.
why it took me three months to read that article a few times.
Well, I'm so glad that you gave it the due and the length that you did, because there is so much value in that, and not something that you can just quick hit some bullet points on that. That was so fantastic. I personally, I love these, almost like these quantum physics realm type things, and where you're talking about, you know, how, and again, referencing Einstein, and how he spoke on this. I mean, there's so much that I could chime in on this, but
Right.
I'll turn it over to any others that have any questions or
Well,
comments, if they're.
I would just add on that just hearing the topic, like I said, I kept coming back to that article. There's been a lot of times in the last month or so since I've had that article that I would stop myself when I get in this and just go, it's bigger than this, Laurel. It's bigger than this,
Mhm.
and just
Yeah.
that piece alone, I think, was helpful. So
That's
anyway,
a
I'll
great,
shut up.
great. No, that's a great point, because what I'm hearing you say is that is something where, after you kind of ingested this article and you're thinking about it and you're working on it, and then you can put it into kind of your practical. You're out and you're doing your thing, and this is not something that you put on a shelf and you know just let sit there. This is something that you're integrated, and you're able to integrate into your walking, your time, you're thinking about this, you're applying this. The one part where you talked about just kind of soaking in a moment and allowing your brain to kind of like experience that more deeper, and when you
Yeah, the
said, wherever
savoring.
you
Yeah,
savoring it. Yeah, that term,
yeah,
savoring it. Yeah, you talk about awe and then savoring. And what a practical takeaway to be able to say, I'm going to say, we use that term kind of, right? I'm going to savor
right.
this moment, but how many of us really know or have the fun with the science of it? I'm literally going to kind of do this savoring exercise so that it kind of slows time.
Right.
It's a wonderful article, wonderful piece that you went through there. Yeah.
I just
Any other
know that,
thoughts?
yeah, I know that I want to travel more now. I want those new experiences so that my time can seem slower.
Well,
Yeah.
Al gave me. I read it to Al. Of course, Al's like, really? I mean, he's pretty A and B. But I read it to him a couple times. But um, he said that I liked it because it said that routine, even though it's efficient, your brain just kind of skips over that a little bit because it already knows that. And
Hmm.
and he said that's why you like that article, because you never like to do the same thing two times in a row.
Well, you're the one that said that you never drove the same way
I know. I
I
don't
when I
walk the
heard that
same
the
way
first
either.
time, and I know some of you know Laurel more years than I have, and I'm like, what? I mean, you are
Right.
the queen of this space. I mean, you've lived this. I mean,
Of
who does that?
inconsistency, I guess you could look at it either way. But yeah. Yeah. So I said, oh, that's good. And I tell you, when we came down here for 4 months, that was a big change. But anytime like you move, I said, gosh, when you move or when you travel, you have to find a place. Like you get to your house, you got to figure out, where am I going to put my stuff, especially if you're there for more than a couple of days. And so I think anything that mixes it up, and older people tend to, like my brother in Texas, he's proud to say it. He's stuck in his rut and he likes it. But I think so I'm gonna read this to him.
Well,
Yeah.
think about this. Always when you're going someplace for the first time, you're looking at the directions and stuff, you're going to go and have dinner with some friends or something. It always takes longer to get there than it does to get back. It just doesn't, don't you think that? I mean, gosh,
That's a good point.
it didn't take as long to get home as it did to get there. And I always wonder
Yeah,
about
that's
that.
true.
But tying this into your perception, wow, that's really cool. I like that.
That is so true. Yeah, the first time you go to that restaurant, everything is novel, everything is new. You didn't see that tree, you didn't see that corner, you didn't see that house or whatever is along the road. On the way back, your brain is already kicking into what it does really well, which is be efficient. It's just like, yeah, there's another tree, there's another whatever. It just condenses that, and it seems like literally it took less time to get back than it did to go there. That's a great observation, Pam.
Well, I think that's
Yeah.
true at driving anywhere. Sometimes you drive and you get somewhere that you've gone many times. You go, did I even see the lights, the traffic lights? I don't remember. Did I, I mean, you're so conscious of, doing it automatically that sometimes I stop. And I think maybe that's why I drove home different ways all the time, just so I'd pay attention.
And it reminds me
Well,
of when you go on vacation too, because I mean, I always have felt the best part of vacation is preparing for it, packing and getting things organized and thinking about what you're going to be doing, and so much of the fun you play over in your mind to begin with, because when you get to the vacation, boom, it seems to go by so fast that the preparation period is many times a lot of good time to savor things too, and then during that vacation, savor those moments. But yeah, that's a great article.
Well, wasn't it that article last week, or I don't know, I don't remember where I read it or we talked about it, that the dopamine, you get as much dopamine in preparing for an activity as you do,
Yeah.
and the excitement of it as you do actually doing it.
Yeah.
So that would add
right.
to that right there, Carol.
Yeah, exactly. I've said that for years. That just if you're going to go out and buy some clothes, if you're a woman, go buy out some new clothes, and then you're packing and you're putting things together. That's a big fun thing. It's sometimes a little stressful, but it's a good stress, and it's fun. It's part of that whole trip that you go on, a part of the whole adventure. Yeah, that's
Mm.
Different personalities. So I like to just throw things in a suitcase and go spontaneously. And as you're saying, Chris's joy of any trip, and it took me a long time to learn this, is not the trip, it's the preparation. And then on the trip to be able to go, check, that went right. Check, that went right. Check, that went right. So very appreciative for the logistics people. The second thing is, just a reminder to anybody who might be watching this as we talk about extreme exercise. When you start HealthPointe, we're looking for the movement, the body movement that you will choose to do every day. And the other thing was, I guess, from I need to look at it with a more positivity, is the positive anxiety you get when you strive to meet somebody and talk about HealthPointe, or the positive anxiety as I'm driving or getting ready for a Zoom to share HealthPointe with somebody, and how all that anxiety, positive anxiety and new experiences is really pumping me up.
Yeah.
well,
That's great. And he definitely Dr. Tommy Wood spoke about that. We could do another piece on just that, on what you just talked about, David. And again, in this coaching, in this business development realm, if you're experiencing some of that fear, that mild anxiety, he said that stress is good. Like you're saying, David, it pumps you up. It's a lot of people try to avoid that, but what he's saying is, hey, that's how our bodies have evolved. If you have he used a term efficiency. If you're very, very efficient, then you're going to be um, stressing your brain less, which is actually not good from a health standpoint.
can I tell a funny story about last Monday night? I was going to save it for Monday, but I think for those of you that got up early this morning, I'm going to share it with you. And if we've got a minute, Eric?
Yes, for sure.
Oh, okay. Well, so Monday night's lean team, and of course, I've got to be mentally prepared for lean team. And thank goodness for Eric and Beth that make me always look good when I'm not prepared. But last week was a particularly, if you want to say, stressful one, because probably 4 days prior, we started a beep. And typically, the beep in the house is one of our smoke detectors. And every 30 seconds, you get this beep, and it drives you nuts after a while. So we call our handyman, because our ceilings are very, very high, so we can't get to them. So we call our handyman, and he's, of course, in Naples, Florida until Monday. So he says, okay, I'm going to come up Monday at the end of the workday. I thought, just come on anytime. Well, I thought end of the workday was 5 o'clock. So he shows up at 6:30, and I told him that we have a Zoom at 8 o'clock that I have to put on. So we have to be done. Always says that's just going to take a minute to change that smoke detector battery. Well, he comes here. He's got his tall ladder, and we've got, I don't know, I think 8 smoke detectors in our house. So He changes the one that we think it is, and it's not. Then he changes a second one, and it's not. He changed all of them, every one of them, and none of them. It still beeped. And he absolutely didn't know what he was going to do because he couldn't get rid of that beep. And I'm looking at the clock, and by now it is 25 to 8. And usually I got everything set up and I'm like, getting into the moment. And he's running around the house trying to find the beep. And he's got the ladder, he's got the tools everywhere, and Hank's trying to figure things out. And he's bound determined he's going to get that beep. Probably after 7:45, both guys realize it's not the smoke detectors at all, it's our radon detector. So they find the radar detector, change the batteries, and he's out the door as I get on for the preempt of the lean team. He's walking out the door with his check. And so you talk about stress and everything, and then you've got to, cut it. And all I could think of is lean team, lean team, lean team. And this is going around, this circus is going around the house. I'm preparing, I'm sitting down. He's walking out the door as I'm logging on. And you just do a turnaround. But those funny experiences is how you sometimes handle. It was a negative stress, but it really wasn't. I mean, I think negative stress is a whole different ball game, but it was a stressful situation. But how quickly you can train your brain to just cut and get in the moment. And so that was a stressful experience that I had to share with you guys. So if you think that when I get on, and thank you, Eric and Beth, thank you guys so much, because at least I didn't have to worry about technology. All I had to worry about is getting on, making sure the lights were on, and people were coming in. So I want to thank you guys once again for saving me. But there you go, stress.
And speed of recovery, right?
And speed of recovery. Yeah, kind
Yeah.
of like the heart rate. I can turn around real fast.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And I was curious about that because you mentioned it. Yeah. So really, really great.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
didn't want to take the time on Monday night.
Yeah. Um, and we have one announcement that I know, and that is, I mentioned this in the preamble that next week, a week from today, next Saturday, so we won't do a Voices of Health Point. We won't do a Zoom, due just to our segment of travel, Emily and I, during that. So we'll bounce on that. Any other announcements that we want to comment here? Anybody, as we're wrapping up? I don't think so. All right. Okay, guys.
I
Well,
just want to
this.
I just want to do a quick red alert.
Oh, yes, yes. I'm sorry, Carol. Yes, please do.
Okay. No, that's okay. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if you. Yeah, I have a quick. It's 30 seconds, but a red alert. If you're ever going to pay HealthPointe forward, get your list out now and start laying the groundwork, because you will be so glad May 1st that you laid the groundwork this week to get in front of people. And I want to remind everybody that our Network 21 members that there is a HealthPointe explained, I think it's 11 or 12-minute explanation of the HealthPointe program you can send out to anybody. And Leslie Samara does a really nice professional job of explaining the business of the HealthPointe lifestyle program in 11 or 12 minutes. And so make sure you get on there, listen to it, familiarize yourself with it, and start sharing it with people. It's both on the share and it's also on the media library. But you'll definitely want to start sharing it with people and share it with your clients so they can share it, because it's a really, really nice, quick tool. And Thursday at 1 o'clock, you can go on your N21 mobile app and you can just pull up a live stream, and automatically a free live stream will come up of a challenge that Network 21 is putting on. No details yet. We've gotten some details, but they're still finalizing things. But it'll all be explained to everybody on April 30th. So all I'm going to say is this week, pay it forward, pay it forward, pay it forward, pay it forward. But don't put anybody on HealthPointe until next Monday. Pay it forward, pay it forward, pay it forward. It's going to be exciting.
Love it. That is great. And great marching orders as we're wrapping up this segment. So, hey guys, thanks everyone so much. Sunglasses are going back on. Emily and I are on our way to the Outer Banks. Thank you, everyone. Till next time, again, not next Saturday, but the Saturday after. We'll be into May. We'll see everyone next 2 weeks from today. Until then, everyone, bye-bye.
Have a great
Bye.
time.
Thank
Enjoy.
Have a
you.
great
Adios.
time. Have fun.